I came across it purely by chance on the internet, if I remember rightly, looking for. I think I've heard of the Biographers Club in other contexts, but I think I then looked them up and discovered there was a prize. And as I was thinking of working a biographer, I thought, well, I'll have a go.
Because biography is a house of many, many, many mansions, as everybody in this room knows. And people write biographies for all sorts of different reasons, and they come at it from all sorts of different angles.
What made you decide then to enter the competition?
To enter the competition, actually, my godmother spotted an advert in the London Review of Books, and I did actually enter last year. I don't know if that's illegal, I hope not.
A friend, a working colleague, read about it in the newspaper, in the Daily Mail, I think, who were one of the sponsors of the prize. And I thought about entering it last year, but it wasn't the right time.
They actually acquired a pile of newspapers and passed me the Daily Mail, and so I just had a flick through. I never read it, and I flicked through, and I saw this, and I cut it out. And of course, completely forgot about it, put it in my desk. I was clearing my desk out, I suppose, in about May or something like that. And I thought, well, that's a challenge. I should get on and have a go.
And eventually I wrote my book, and I was very pleased with it. It was in proof, and I went to Los Angeles just to do a tiny last checkup on something or the other, and I found myself sitting next to someone at supper who asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I was writing a book about Charles Lawton, and he said, oh, what did you make of the archive at UCLA? Archive, I said. UCLA. Great, I said, and the next day I went to see it. I left university in order to act, and I only auditioned for one drama school because I decided that was the one I wanted to go to. And the reason, because I had no idea at all whether I had any gift at all as an actor, I thought, well, I'll just choose the one which is the toughest. And if they see any merit in me, then maybe I might be an actor.
How did that affect you as somebody who is, if you like, an artist of the word? Both as a biographer and a director and an actor.
Well, I was a very verbal person. I mean, all my energy was concentrated into words.
And so didn't biography naturally follow, or was it a conscious decision? Right, I'm now going to write a biography of.
The biography had always been my favourite genre of writing. I was an avid consumer of biographies from childhood. You know, those little children's stories, Lives of the Composers particularly, I love. Yeah. But anybody's lives interested me. Lives continue to interest me.
What use is a biography?
I've been lucky so far in that all the people that I've written about, Charles Lawton and Orson Welles and Charles Dickens and Oscar Wilde, are all kind of self-recommending in a sense. The only thing I had to say was why I should write a book about them, and the answer in the case of certainly both Lawton and Wells was precisely the one that I practice the same job that they do, and could perhaps give some a new light, throw some new light on that aspect of them, and then the other two, Dickens and Wilde, I'd performed a great deal, so I knew about them from the inside. I think that was, and that's clearly something that a biographer would want to. It's got to have some kind of a handle on his or her subject for some reason or another. You've got to have some gut feeling about it, and that, I suspect, is what would excite a publisher.
What kind of criteria? I mean, was it only based on the actual writing or the subject that they chose? Or?
No, but also saleability. So we had to put ourselves in a publisher's shoes and decide whether we thought it was a proposal that was good. Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with whether things are well written, which always slightly skews my judgment. Because you might get a really good subject, and I'm afraid I might condemn it because I think it was badly written, which is embarrassing and difficult. So,
well, I completely agreed with Nicola on that, and it was absolutely essential for me that the submissions looked, even if they weren't literate at the moment, they, with a little bit of help, or a little bit more time, that they would be readable, not merely readable, but a pleasure to read and worth reading.
But saleability was really important. Yes, because that is the hardest. I mean, if you've got the knack of writing books, you've got the knack.
Exactly.
But finding things that A, publishers will buy and B, the public will buy is a lot harder.
But the real trouble is that almost all of the great subjects have been done, and it's extraordinarily difficult to justify writing a very long book on a minor person unless you have some eccentric hook which takes it away from just being a biography and turns it into social milieu.
And in a way, some people can write and others can't. And I find that a very interesting question. They were all good.
I think a few of them were good enough to be published without actually being good writing.
No, and that I'm not sure with my publisher's hat on, I agree with.
My proposal is about a biography of the daughters of Wordsworth and Coleridge, who were called Dora Wordsworth and Sarah Coleridge. And they were friends, lifelong friends, and both of them had, I think, fascinating lives. Both of them sort of lived very much in the shadow of their fathers.
Well, the proposal is a biography of a debauched aristocrat called John Bristol, who died almost 10 years ago, tragically young, age 44, having blown a family fortune stretching back 200 years. And it's a story that always intrigued me, how someone with so much wealth could be so trapped by it and basically end his life in such a sad and tragic way. So the idea is to go back and talk to all the people he knew and work with and find out what he was really like. So that's the proposal really.
Yes, the man I'm actually trying to write about is called Henry Tonks. He started life as a surgeon. He was professor of anatomy at the London Hospital, and at about the age of 32 he suddenly decided to take himself off to a sort of evening art class when he had a moment, and he went off to the art class, and he was taught by somebody called Fred Brown, and Fred Brown subsequently was asked to take over the running of a Slade, and rather surprisingly to Henry Tonks, he said to Henry Tonks, would you be prepared to give up your career as a surgeon? He was quite an eminent surgeon, come and help me.
I'm proposing a new popular life of Joseph Priestley, who's an 18th century scientist, theologian, political philosopher and teacher, a very important figure in British history, and one I feel whose reputation needs to be much more widely known. He discovered oxygen. He was very unpopular in England at the time of the American and French revolutions and gained a pretty explosive reputation, which eventually got him kicked out of the country. So he's quite a controversial character as well.
Yes, my proposal is about Francis Barber. Barber was Samuel Johnson's manservant. He came to England having been a slave, born into slavery in Jamaica. Came to England about 1750 and joined Johnson's household. So obviously got to know a lot of the famous figures in Johnson's circle. He had a range of interesting experience. He ran away to sea at one point, served in the Navy in the 7 Years' War. He later married a white woman, which was of course quite controversial in the 18th century. They had children, which was again quite controversial. And ultimately, when Johnson died, he left him all his money. And again, something which not many people did in the 18th century, leaving all their money to a black former slave. So again, that caused some hostility to him. And so it's his story about the experiences, but in some way typical of what black people experienced in England in the 18th century, but in some ways very unusual because of all the famous people he met and people in Johnson's circle in particular.
Fantastic.
There are enormous numbers of elements which go into the creation of a character. We like to form, many of us, an image of the character's face, so that bit by bit we begin to assemble what this person, if this invented person, was, who he was, where he came from, what he was all about, what his significance is in the scheme of things. And so it's by those methods that we finally arrive at our goal, which is, in my view, to think the thoughts of another human being. Nobody in life is really a character. We're all far more complicated than can ever be put down on the written page. And it's a kind of an insanity to believe, and it is a kind of ignis fatuus that we're all following is that we will actually nail our man or woman fully, completely and absolutely. And we never will. So I have to acknowledge that just as whenever, if I play Falstaff or Henry VIII, I can only possibly give you my Falstaff and my Henry VIII. And in the same way, I can only ever give you my Orson Welles or my Charles Laughton. It's an interpretation, and one is tremendously aware of above all, what one has left out.